the little crowned one who could bend power itself with a whisper the night the child was born. The world went quiet. Lights across the small human colony flickered once and died. Homes lost warmth. Screens went dark. The sky above the settlement dimmed as the orbital grid failed, one layer at a time. People stepped outside in fear, looking up, thinking it was an attack. But no ships appeared. No alarms screamed. There was only silence, deep and heavy, like the world was holding its breath. In a narrow medical building near the edge of the colony, a woman cried out in pain. Her name did not matter. She was alone except for one tired doctor and an old power unit humming weakly in the corner. The machines meant to help her had already shut down. The doctor worked by hand, sweat on his face, praying the power would return. It did not. When the child finally arrived, the air in the room changed. It was not warm or cold. It felt tense, stretched thin. The old power unit let out a sharp sound, then went silent. The doctor froze, thinking it had finally died. Then, softly, the power unit came back on. Its lights glowed steady and calm, brighter than before. The medical tools hummed to life. Outside, far away, a few lights in the colony flickered back on, just for a moment. The child did not cry. The doctor noticed a faint mark on the child's head, just above the brow. It looked like a small ring, almost like a crown, pressed gently into the skin. He thought it was just a birthmark. He had no time to think more. The mother was weak. The night was long. By morning, the power across the colony returned in uneven waves. Engineers blamed a rare system fault. Officials wrote reports. The event was logged and forgotten. But not everything forgot. Far beyond the colony, in the dark between stars, something noticed the brief bending of energy. It was small, almost nothing, but it was wrong. Power did not move that way. It did not slow, then flow, then calm, as if soothed. Sensors turned. Silent watchers adjusted their focus. On the colony, life went on. The child grew slowly. He was small, quiet, and often sick. He did not speak much, even when he was old enough to try. His guardian was an aging technician named Aaron, a man with tired eyes and rough hands. Aaron had been a friend of the child's mother, and when she passed 2 years later, he took the child in without question. Aaron noticed things. When the child was scared, lights dimmed. When the child slept badly, machines nearby made strange sounds. Once, when the heating unit failed during a cold night, Aaron wrapped the child in blankets and whispered comfort. The child whispered too, barely a sound at all. The heater turned back on. Aaron stared at it for a long time, his heart beating hard. He checked the controls. Nothing had changed. The unit should not have restarted. After that, Aaron paid attention. He tested nothing. He asked no one. He simply watched. When the child whispered in frustration, a locked door clicked open. When the child whispered in fear, a broken screen cleared. It was never strong, never dramatic, just small bends in how power behaved. The child never seemed to notice. As the years passed, the colony faced trouble. Supplies grew thin. Systems aged. The orbital grid failed more often. Engineers worked day and night, but parts were scarce. Tempers flared. Fear crept in. One evening, a critical water processor failed. Without it, half the colony would have to evacuate within days. Engineers gathered, arguing loudly, voices sharp with stress. Aaron stood nearby with the child, who clutched his sleeve, eyes wide at the noise. The lead engineer cursed and kicked the machine in anger. Nothing changed. The child whispered. No one heard the words. They were too soft. But everyone felt the moment when the machine shuddered, then settled. Power flowed through it smoothly, as if it had always been fine. Silence fell over the room. The engineers stared at the machine, then at each other. One of them laughed nervously and said it must have been a loose connection. Another nodded too fast. No one looked at the child. Aaron did. That night he packed a bag. He did not know what the child was. He only knew that attention was dangerous. Humans feared what they could not explain. And humans were not the only ones watching the stars. He moved them to the outer edge of the colony, near old structures that few people visited. He limited contact. He told the child stories instead of letting him wander. He taught him to stay quiet, to breathe slowly, to whisper only when alone. The child obeyed, not because he understood, but because he trusted Aaron. Beyond human space, the watchers drew closer. They did not see the child. Not yet. But they traced the energy bands back to the colony. They shared data among themselves, confused and uneasy. This kind of effect was forbidden by the old laws of power. It suggested influence without force, control without structure. Impossible. They decided to observe. Years passed. The child grew a little taller, but never strong. His eyes were thoughtful. He asked simple questions. Why did machines break? Why did people shout? Why did whispers feel warm? Aaron never had good answers. One day, a patrol ship from outside human territory arrived without warning. It did not attack. It did not broadcast threats. It simply hovered above the colony, its presence heavy and silent. Officials panicked quietly. Messages were sent. Replies came slow. A representative descended alone. Tall, thin, wrapped in dark fabric that hid most of its shape. Its voice was calm and smooth when it spoke to the colony leaders. It said it was there to investigate a power anomaly. Aaron felt cold fear settle in his chest when he heard that. The representative walked through the colony, guided by nervous officials. Its devices scanned air, metal, energy flow. When it passed near the old structures, its head tilted slightly. Its pace slowed. Aaron kept the child inside, lights dimmed, systems off. The child sat on the floor, drawing shapes in dust, whispering to himself without sound. The representative stopped outside the building. Inside, the old power unit groaned under the strain of being shut down for so long. The child looked up, frowning. He whispered. Just once. The power unit fell silent, completely dead. Outside, the representative paused, then moved on. Aaron did not breathe until the presence was gone. That night, the sky above the colony shimmered faintly, like a distant reflection. The watchers recorded everything. They were no longer unsure. Something was here. Something small. Something human. And it was only just beginning. The colony had grown used to quiet nights, but now the quiet felt heavier. People whispered among themselves, nervous after the strange visit. The patrol ship had left, but its presence lingered, like a shadow that did not move with the sun. Aaron kept the child close, wary of anyone who looked too curious or asked too many questions. He had learned long ago that people feared what they could not explain, and fear often became something dangerous. The child, small and thin, moved slowly through the old structures that few humans visited. Dust lay thick on the floor. Sunlight weak and scattered, shone through cracks in the walls. The child drew circles and lines in the dust, his tiny hands moving carefully, his lips moving in soft, almost silent whispers. Aaron watched, leaning against a wall, arms crossed as the child worked. Sometimes the child's whispers made lights flicker nearby, or tools hum softly even though they were not plugged in. Aaron never commented. He simply watched, knowing the child could not understand what he was or what he could do. Outside the hidden building, the colony continued life as usual. Workers repaired broken machines, farmers tended small greenhouses, and children ran in narrow streets. No one knew that danger lingered above them. The patrol ship had reported the anomaly to the Alliance that ruled nearby systems, and now they were sending more observers. Not all would come openly. Some would arrive disguised, walking among humans. Their eyes and sensors would watch everything, recording, measuring, analyzing. One evening, as the sky burned orange with sunset, a tall man named Darren entered the colony. He claimed to be an engineer sent to repair a distant station, but his eyes scanned every movement, every shadow, every sign of unusual energy. Aaron noticed him immediately. There was something about the man's calm, precise way of moving that made the old technician uneasy. A sub-background, the parallel Bob. He decided to watch him closely, keeping the child out of sight. The child, however, was never truly hidden. Even in shadows, he could feel attention, and he did not like it. When Darren walked near the old structures, the air seemed to tingle. Dust shifted slightly, as if moved by invisible fingers. Tools left on shelves clattered softly without explanation. Darren stopped. He frowned, scanning the room with instruments that hummed and beeped. His lips moved silently as he whispered to a device that floated near him. Even with all his sensors, he could not make sense of what was happening. Aaron pulled the child back, holding him tight. The child's eyes were wide, filled with curiosity and fear. He did not understand why his whispers could make machines move or hum, or why Darren seemed to notice. Aaron whispered to him, his voice low, warning him to stay silent, to breathe slowly, to not focus on the man outside. The child nodded, trusting Aaron completely, though he could not fully understand why. That night, strange noises came from the colony perimeter. Small alarms that usually meant nothing tripped repeatedly. Power lights blinked in odd patterns. Aaron grabbed a flashlight and went outside with the child, moving carefully through narrow streets. They saw nothing at first, only shadows stretching long across the walls. Then, far above, a small ship glimmered in the dark sky, barely visible. It moved silently, observing. Aaron's heart thumped. He knew the Watchers had returned, this time more serious, more patient. The next days were tense. Darren stayed, asking more questions, pretending to fix minor repairs, all while scanning for energy fluctuations. Aaron limited the child's exposure, keeping him inside. Still, the child noticed everything. Even without meaning to, he whispered softly as he walked around the room, and lights flickered. Tools responded. Even old computers started up for brief moments without power. Aaron shook his head quietly. He worried the child would be discovered. One afternoon, a sudden crisis struck the colony. A power hub at the main supply station malfunctioned. Without it, the settlement would have no water circulation for the next 3 days. Engineers panicked. They tried switches, repairs, and improvisation, but nothing worked. The machines groaned, sparked, and then went completely dark. People began shouting, fear rising quickly. The child stood quietly in the corner of the room, watching. He did not move. He did not cry. He simply whispered. The sound was so soft that no one noticed. But immediately the power hub shivered. Lights blinked on, and machines hummed in life. Water flowed again. Now, the engineers froze. No one understood. The air seemed to grow still, holding everyone in a strange silence. One of the engineers laughed nervously and said it must be a coincidence. Another agreed, though they both looked uneasy. Aaron stepped forward, eyes hard. He did not allow anyone to look at the child. No one saw anything, he said. Just get back to work. He led the child away quickly, ignoring questions, ignoring protests. Outside, the child looked up at the sky. He did not smile. He only whispered again, and for a moment, the stars seemed to tremble slightly above them, like the night sky itself was listening. The watchers in the void noticed immediately. They recorded the anomaly, shared the data among themselves. Their confusion turned into something else, fear. The child was bending power itself, not machines.
No technique. No technology.
Only the whisper of a human voice, something so small, so fragile, and yet so impossible. Over the next few weeks, the colony tried to return to normal, but normal felt different. Humans were careful. Parents kept children close. Workers avoided the old structures. Aaron trained the child quietly, teaching him to stay calm, to whisper only when alone, to breathe slowly, and to focus on small things instead of letting attention notice. The child obeyed, small hands folded in his lap, eyes wide with silent understanding. He had no concept of danger, but he could feel when it was near. The watchers changed tactics. They could not approach openly again. Some landed disguised as engineers or traders. Others used distant sensors, scanning for minute disturbances in energy flow. They began sending messages back to command. The human child was unique. He was not a threat now, but he could be. If discovered, if used incorrectly, he could bend power on a scale no one had imagined. One evening, a violent storm struck the colony. Lightning struck the perimeter, and winds tore at the fragile structures. The settlement trembled under the assault. The power grid failed in multiple places. Emergency lights flickered and died. People panicked. Engineers shouted instructions that could not be followed. The child whispered. The wind slowed. The lightning seemed to hesitate before striking. Broken wires sparked, then stopped. Lights returned, not fully, but enough to guide people safely. Aaron clutched the child, shivering, heart pounding. He had never seen the child do so much at once. He had never realized the power could act without thought or guidance, simply by being. After the storm passed, Aaron knew the colony had changed. People would talk about miracles quietly. Children would hear stories that did not make sense. And somewhere far beyond, watchers would take note, sending new orders. The child had no control, no understanding, and yet the universe had noticed. That night, Aaron tucked the child into bed and whispered a promise. They would stay hidden, stay small, and survive. He did not know for how long. He did not know if it would be enough. The child closed his eyes, still whispering softly to himself, almost as if responding to some unseen presence. Far above the colony, beyond human vision, distant watchers recorded every whisper, every movement. Their reports would change strategy. They would bring others. They would study humans more closely. They did not yet know that the child was not a tool nor a weapon. He was something else entirely. Something the galaxy had not seen in countless generations. The colony slept, unaware of what the future might hold. And in the quiet corners of the settlement, a small crowned child dreamed, whispering softly to powers that had never bent before. The colony had grown quiet since the strange visit from the patrol ship, but quiet did not mean safe. People moved carefully, glancing at one another, whispering in corners, fearing something they could not see. Aran kept the child close, watching, always watching. The child had grown a little taller now, his movements slow but deliberate, his eyes wide and observant. He rarely spoke, except for whispers, soft words that sometimes seemed to bend the machines around him, though he did not know it. Aaron had learned early that attention was dangerous. When others looked too closely at the child, something almost imperceptible would change in the air. Lights flickered, machines hummed or shivered, and tools moved slightly without cause. People thought it was coincidence, though some whispered about luck or miracles. Aaron knew better. The child was not doing magic. He was bending energy itself, quietly, naturally, with a sound barely above nothing. One morning, a new visitor arrived. He called himself Lyron, an engineer sent from a distant system, though his eyes scanned every corner of the colony with suspicion and focus. He was tall, thin, and precise, moving as though the world itself should obey him. Aaron noticed him immediately. He did not trust the man, nor did he allow the child to see him. Lyron had devices that floated near him, recording, analyzing, measuring energy flows with a sophistication Aaron had never seen. Every time the child moved or whispered, Lyron's instruments shivered or beeped, as though confused. The child did not notice the devices, though he sensed the attention. His tiny hands traced lines and dust on the floor. His whispers were soft, almost silent, but they affected the air, the lights, the machines around him. Aaron watched, heart tight. He knew the child's abilities were growing, and that danger was not just close, it was already watching. That afternoon, the colony faced a crisis. The water processor, a critical machine that fed every settlement in the area, failed. Engineers ran from one panel to another, shouting instructions, trying to reboot systems manually. Sparks flew from broken wires. People shouted in panic, but no solution worked. The child stood quietly in the corner, watching. He did not move. He did not cry. He only whispered soft words that no one could hear. Slowly the water processor hummed back to life. Water flowed again. The engineers froze. No one understood. They looked at one another nervously, whispering excuses about faulty sensors or strange electrical fluctuations. Aaron stepped forward, eyes hard, and guided the child out of sight. No one saw anything, he said. Just go back to work. The child followed without question, small hand in his, eyes wide and thoughtful. Over the next weeks, strange occurrences became more frequent. Broken machines repaired themselves, lights flickered for no reason, and minor fires fizzled out before anyone could notice. Aaron worried constantly. He trained the child quietly, teaching him to stay calm, to whisper only when alone, to breathe slowly and focus on small things, not on attention. The child obeyed, though he did not understand fully. He trusted Aaron completely. Meanwhile, Lyron continued to observe. He moved through the colony during the day, pretending to repair equipment, while secretly scanning for energy disturbances. He noticed patterns, strange connections between the child's presence and the activity of nearby machines. He could not explain it, but he recorded everything, sharing data with his hidden superiors far beyond human space. The reports warned that the anomaly was growing. This was no simple technological problem. It was something entirely new. One evening, a violent storm swept across the colony. Lightning cracked against the buildings. Winds tore at fragile structures. Power grids failed in multiple places. Emergency lights flickered and died. People panicked, running through streets that had become dangerous and unpredictable. Engineers tried desperately to maintain control, shouting instructions that could not be followed. The colony felt like it might collapse completely. The child whispered. The storm slowed. Winds seemed to weaken. Lightning hesitated. Broken wires no longer sparked. Machines that had failed began to hum lightly. Lights returned, though weakly, guiding people to safety. Aaron clutched the child tightly, shivering with awe and fear. He had never seen so much happen at once, nor did he understand how the child could affect so many systems simultaneously. It was not machines that obeyed. It was the power itself, bending slightly to the child's will without force, without understanding, without planning. After the storm, Aaron led the child back to the hidden structures. People spoke in hushed tones about miracles or luck, but Aaron knew it was neither. He feared attention more than ever. The child had no idea of his own power. He did not know how dangerous it was to be seen, or how closely others now watched him. Aaron resolved to hide him better, to limit contact, to protect him until the child could understand himself. But hiding was difficult. Observers were patient. They moved in disguise, blending with humans, pretending to be workers, traders, or engineers. Some hovered in orbit, scanning silently. They studied the child's effect on the environment, noting every flicker of light, every machine that moved without touch. They whispered to one another across vast distances, their confusion turning into concern, then into something sharper: fear. Aaron trained the child daily. He taught him to breathe, to relax, to control small movements, and to keep his whispers quiet. The child responded with obedience, small hands folded, eyes alert. He learned quickly, not because he understood the danger, but because he trusted Aaron completely. One morning, the child discovered a broken hover car outside. The engine had failed, the circuits fried. He bent over it, whispering softly to himself. Tools near him hummed and moved, wires connected themselves, and the engine roared to life, startling him. Aaron watched silently from a distance, worried that someone might see. But no one did. The child smiled slightly, pleased with the success, though he had no idea how extraordinary the moment was. Meanwhile, the observers grew more restless. They had never seen a human with such ability. The child's influence was subtle, yet undeniable. Their instruments could not explain it, and attempts to measure it directly failed. The anomaly was alive in a way that violated their understanding of energy, of power, of control. They sent coded warnings to higher authorities. A human child was bending power itself. One evening, a trader named Miko arrived at the colony. He claimed to bring supplies from a distant system, but his instruments detected anomalies. He watched the colony quietly, noting the faint flickers of energy, the strange hums of idle machines. He recorded everything, thinking he would sell the information for profit. But as he observed the child from a distance, he paused. He felt something in the air that made him uneasy. The whispers were almost silent, yet they carried weight. He shivered, leaving quickly with his goods, but the memory of what he saw would not leave him. The child, oblivious to all of this, continued to whisper softly in his sleep. Small words that carried unseen meaning. Lights flickered gently, machines hummed quietly, and the air seemed calm despite the chaos of the colony around him. Aaron lay awake beside him, heart heavy with worry. He knew attention would come again. He knew the watchers would not rest, and he knew the child could not protect himself. Days passed. The colony attempted normal life, but nothing felt ordinary. Workers moved cautiously. Children played near the old structures but avoided them if Aaron was not near. Engineers worked in quiet teams, speaking in low tones, avoiding the areas where the child might wander. Aaron trained the child in small ways, teaching him how to focus, how to remain calm, how to keep his whispers from attracting notice. One night, a small ship descended quietly near the colony. It carried observers who did not wish to be seen. They landed on the outskirts, recording energy fluctuations, watching from the shadows. Aaron sensed their presence before they revealed themselves. He took the child to a hidden chamber, dimly lit, where no one would find them. The child whispered softly to himself, perhaps dreaming, perhaps responding to the unseen watchers. Aaron listened to the faint words, knowing the child did not understand his own power, and knowing that the watchers would not leave quietly. The colony slept. Humans dreamed, unaware of the growing tension above them. The child slept as well, small and fragile, whispering softly to the air. Outside, watchers recorded every detail, sending messages to distant command. The anomaly was growing. The human child was not a tool, not a weapon, not a machine. He was something else entirely, something new, something dangerous. Aaron held the child close, whispering promises of safety. He did not know if the promises would be enough. He did not know if hiding could protect them. He only knew that the child must survive, must remain unseen, until he could understand the power that obeyed him without command. Far above, the stars themselves seemed to tremble slightly, responding to the whispers of the little crowned one. And in that quiet, the colony slept, unaware that the future of their world, and perhaps the galaxy, was being shaped by a child who could bend power itself with nothing more than a whisper. The sky above the colony darkened in a way that made the settlers uneasy. Clouds gathered low, but it was not the weather alone that caused the tension. Far above, in orbit, a fleet of ships appeared silently. Their hulls glimmered in the fading light, precise and cold. They did not make announcements. They did not ask for permission. Their presence alone was enough to silence the colony. Aaron sensed them immediately. He was outside with the child, checking the outer walls, making sure no loose panels could attract attention. He froze as he saw the fleet. His mind raced. These were not ordinary visitors. They were observers, inspectors, and possibly conquerors. He did not know their intentions, but he knew they were dangerous. He grabbed the child, pulling him to the shadows of an old storage building. The child clutched Aaron's sleeve, small fingers gripping tightly. He looked up at the sky, eyes wide, noticing the lights on the ships. He whispered softly, almost instinctively. The air around them shimmered faintly, and the flickering of nearby lights responded to the sound. Aaron stared at the child, heart pounding. The child did not speak loudly. He did not shout or cry. Yet power itself seemed to notice him, bending subtly to his will without his understanding. Inside the colony, alarms began to hum. The power grids registered strange fluctuations. I, 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 I. Machines started and stopped randomly. Lights blinked. People stared, confused, some frightened. The colony's engineers ran from one station to another, checking sensors and controls, but nothing made sense. It was not a malfunction. It was the child. The little crowned one was awake, whispering quietly, and the ships above had caused the energy in the colony to react. Aaron led the child through narrow alleys, moving toward the hidden structures. He kept low, avoiding anyone who might notice them. He knew that if the child was seen, the observers would take action, and he knew that there was nothing humans could do to stop them if they acted. Yet he also knew that the child could bend power in ways that even the fleet could not predict. The fleet above began to move. Ships shifted in formation, their movements calculated and precise. They were clearly measuring, testing. Sensors scanned the colony, searching for energy anomalies. The child sensed it, though he could not name it. He whispered again, softly, and machines around them reacted. Lights stabilized, tools hummed, even distant equipment quivered slightly. The fleet's sensors recorded it, and their systems registered something that was not possible. Aaron realized they would not leave peacefully. The observers were planning something. He ducked into the hidden structures with the child, closing doors and cutting power where he could. The child stayed close, whispering to himself, unaware that the fleet was tracking every movement, every soft sound. Aaron's mind raced. He had to protect the child, yet he did not know how long they could remain hidden. One of the observers' ships descended quietly, landing near the colony's perimeter. Its hatch opened, and a figure emerged. It was tall, armored, and moving with calm precision. It carried devices that hovered around it, scanning constantly. Aaron watched from the shadows as the figure approached the colony buildings, moving carefully, studying energy flows. The child, sensing attention, whispered softly again. Machines nearby responded. A broken hovercar engine roared to life. Lights blinked steadily on panels that had failed. The observer paused, scanning, confused. The observer's voice came through a communicator, calm but firm. Identify all anomalies. Report to command. There was no anger, only control. Aaron knew this was a test. They wanted to see if the child could be used, measured, controlled. He tightened his hold on the child, moving him deeper into the shadows. The child looked up at him, small eyes wide, sensing tension, but not fear. He whispered again, and the energy around them pulsed faintly. Aaron's heart pounded. The child had no idea of the attention he drew, and yet the observer sensed it all. Inside the hidden structure, Aaron explained quickly, you must stay quiet. Do not let anyone see you. They are not here to talk. They are here to take you. If they notice, they will not stop. The child listened, nodding, small hands gripping Aaron's arm. He understood trust, though not danger. He trusted Aaron completely. Outside, the observer moved slowly, scanning the perimeter. Machines responded to the child's whispers in ways the observer could not predict. Panels hummed, lights blinked, and energy readings fluctuated. The observer's devices recorded it, then stopped, confused. They did not understand what they were seeing. The child was not controlling machines. He was bending power itself. This was impossible. Suddenly, the sky above the colony shimmered. Other ships in the fleet moved closer. Their formations became tighter. They were testing. They did not attack yet, but the tension was palpable. The colony's population sensed it, though they did not understand why. Farmers paused in their work. Children stopped playing. Engineers whispered to one another, worried about unknown threats. Aaron led the child through underground passages, long-forgotten tunnels that connected old storage areas. He taught the child to move slowly, to whisper only when alone, to focus on calmness. The child did as he was told, small feet silent on the stone floor, small hands folded, eyes alert. Every now and then he whispered softly, and the lights above flickered, energy flows pulsed. Even distant machinery hummed faintly. Aran ignored it, focusing only on keeping the child hidden. Hours passed. The fleet above moved in patterns that seemed to map the colony. The observers could not understand the anomalies, could not predict the reactions. Every soft whisper from the child changed energy flows in ways their instruments could not measure. The child did not know he was doing it. He simply reacted, small and instinctive, like breathing. In the colony, people began to panic quietly. Rumors spread. "Something is here," they whispered. "Something that does not belong." Engineers tried to keep order, but their systems failed unpredictably. Lights blinked, sensors malfunctioned. Nothing followed normal patterns. It was not chaos exactly, but it was something humans could not explain. Aran stayed with the child, moving deeper underground. "We must reach the safe zone," he whispered. The child nodded, whispering softly to himself as they went. The air seemed to respond, currents shifting, small gusts moving in tunnels that should have been still. Machines along the way hummed faintly as if acknowledging the child's presence. Aran's mind raced. He knew the fleet could not measure this directly, but they were sensing it, feeling it, and they would act soon. By nightfall, the colony was almost completely quiet. People stayed inside, fearful. Lights in the streets blinked on and off. Communications were disrupted. The observers above were growing frustrated. They could see patterns, anomalies, reactions, but they could not predict them. The child was bending power itself, not machines, not electronics. Power.
Energy, the fundamental flow of force.
Aran paused in a hidden chamber, letting the child rest. "They will not leave," he said quietly. "They want to study you. They want to use you. You must stay hidden." The child looked up at him, small hands resting on his lap, eyes wide, whispering softly. Aran did not know if the child understood, but he hoped the lessons were sinking in. Outside, the first attacks began, not with weapons, but with probes and scanners designed to test energy limits. They touched panels, wires, and circuits. They measured responses. The child reacted instinctively, whispering again, bending power to stabilize systems. The observers were stunned. They had never seen anything like this. Energy bent to a human's will without command, without understanding, without technology. The tension grew. The fleet moved closer, preparing to intervene. The colony could not resist with normal weapons. The engineers tried to reinforce defenses, but the child's whispers were already changing the battlefield. Lights flickered, shields pulsed, energy grids shifted unpredictably. The observers paused, unsure how to proceed. Aran held the child tightly. "You must stay calm," he whispered. "Nothing else matters. Only stay with me. Only breathe slowly. Only whisper when you must." The child obeyed, small eyes wide, hands resting in his lap. He whispered softly, and once more, energy bent in subtle ways, protecting them from detection, guiding them through tunnels, stabilizing weak structures. The fleet above adjusted again. They sensed resistance. They could not attack directly. The child was not a weapon they could measure or control. They began to communicate with command, sending urgent reports about the anomaly that defied all understanding. Aran and the child rested briefly, knowing the night would be long. They were hidden for now, but the observers were patient. They had not attacked yet, but they would. The child slept, whispering softly in dreams, bending power without knowing it, small and fragile, yet more dangerous than anything the fleet had ever encountered. Outside, the sky remained dark, the fleet hovering silently, waiting. The colony was tense and fearful, and in the quiet of the hidden chambers, Aaron held the child close, praying that the little crowned one would survive the night, that his whispers could protect them, and that power itself would listen to him when the time came. The future was uncertain, the danger growing, and the child remained unaware of the true scale of what he could do. He only whispered, small, soft words, and power bent quietly, responding to the little crowned one who had no idea how much attention he had drawn. The colony had not seen peace for many cycles. The fleet above remained silent and calculating. Ships glimmered against the dark sky like stars that moved with purpose, casting shadows over buildings below. The settlers whispered among themselves, fearful, though they did not know why. Machines hummed faintly, lights flickered, and alarms that usually meant nothing now made people pause. Something had changed. Aran moved cautiously through the hidden tunnels with the child. The little crowned one walked beside him, small hands gripping Aran's arm. He had grown slightly taller, but still fragile and thin. His eyes were wide, observing every detail, and his lips moved in soft whispers that only he could hear. Every now and then the tunnels responded. Lights blinked gently, small machines hummed, and the air seemed to shift around them. Aaron had long ago stopped being surprised. "They are watching more closely now," he whispered. "You must not speak loudly. You must stay calm." The child nodded, whispering softly to himself as if repeating the instructions in his own language. Aran could see the tension in the child's small shoulders, the way he held his head, trying to be careful. He could not explain what the child was or what he could do, only that he had to protect him. Outside, the fleet moved in tighter formations. Sensors scanned every corner of the colony, searching for signs of energy anomalies. Small drones descended, invisible to the untrained eye, gliding along streets, peeking into buildings. People sensed them in a vague way, a feeling of being observed, but they could not see the threat. The child sensed it immediately. He whispered softly, barely above a breath. Machines around him responded. Lights blinked back on. Wires pulsed with power. It was subtle, but enough to frustrate the observers. Days passed in tension. The colony tried to maintain routines, but the fear was constant. Children were kept close, workers moved carefully, and Aaron trained the child in quiet ways. He taught him to focus, to breathe slowly, to whisper only when necessary, to trust instinct. The child obeyed with quiet diligence. He did not fully understand the danger, but he trusted Aaron completely. Small hands folded, eyes alert, lips moving softly. One afternoon, a sudden failure struck the colony's main energy grid. Machines ground to a halt, lights flickered and died, and alarms rang across the settlement. People panicked. Engineers rushed to panels, pressing buttons, testing circuits. Nothing worked. Sparks flew from exposed wires. Fear rose like smoke, thick and choking. The child watched quietly. He whispered softly, almost as if speaking to himself, and the grid shuddered, then came back to life. Lights steadied, machines hummed, and power flowed once more. Engineers froze, confused. They looked at each other nervously, whispering about coincidence, about luck, about some strange phenomenon beyond explanation. Aaron pulled the child away quickly, keeping him hidden from view. That evening, the sky above the colony glimmered strangely. Distant ships shifted positions. Lights blinked on hulls, reflecting faintly in the atmosphere. The fleet was adjusting, responding to the child's presence, testing boundaries. They could not control him, could not measure his ability. They recorded everything, sending messages to command far away. Aaron took the child to the hidden chambers and sat with him. "They will not stop," he whispered. "They want to study you. They want to use you. You must stay hidden." The child nodded, small hands resting in his lap, whispering softly. He did not know what would happen, but he felt tension in the air. An instinct told him to obey. The next days were tense. The child's powers grew stronger, though he did not understand. Lights responded to whispers, machines moved, energy flowed in subtle ways that confused the observers. The colony noticed strange occurrences. Systems that had failed for years suddenly repaired themselves. Alarms that usually screamed did not sound. People whispered about miracles, though they did not understand. Observers began to send operatives closer. Small ships landed quietly on the outskirts, and agents moved among the settlers, disguised as traders, engineers, or travelers. They recorded energy flows, scanned buildings, and watched for signs of the child. Aaron knew this. He guided the child carefully, avoiding anyone who might notice, keeping him away from sensors. One day, a minor crisis struck. A storage facility caught fire due to a power surge. Flames spread quickly, threatening supplies and lives. The child, small and fragile, moved to the edge of the building. He whispered softly, and the fire slowed, flames bending away, almost as if guided by invisible hands. Smoke cleared in small patches, and machines began to function again, pumping water to stop the spread. Workers stared in confusion, unsure what had happened. Aaron grabbed the child, pulling him away, whispering instructions to stay hidden. As the child's abilities grew, so did the danger. The observers above and on the ground were learning. They could not control him, but they could sense his power and were testing boundaries. Every whisper from the child caused unexpected reactions. Lights blinked, circuits pulsed, energy flows shifted. It was subtle, but enough to frustrate even the most advanced instruments. Aaron continued training the child. "You must remain calm," he said quietly. "Your power will grow, but you cannot let them see. You must trust your instincts. You must whisper softly." The child listened, obeying completely. His small hands folded, eyes alert, lips moving in quiet murmurs that changed the environment around him. Meanwhile, the colony's people grew uneasy. Rumors spread about strange occurrences, about machines that repaired themselves, about lights that blinked without cause. Some whispered about luck, some about miracles, and a few feared something unknown. Iran ignored them, focusing only on keeping the child hidden. The observers grew frustrated. Their instruments could measure anomalies, but they could not predict reactions. The child's whispers bent power itself, not machines, not electronics, not technology. Energy responded instinctively, in ways that no device could record or control. The fleet communicated with command, reporting the anomaly as something dangerous, unpredictable, and unique.
One evening, a sudden storm struck.
Lightning cracked across the sky, winds tore at buildings, and power grids failed. People panicked. Engineers ran to stabilize systems, but nothing worked. The child whispered softly, and the storm seemed to hesitate. Lightning struck less frequently. Wind slowed, and power stabilized in small sections. Aaron watched in awe, heart pounding. The child had no understanding of the full scale of what he was doing. He simply reacted, instinctively, bending power itself, without command or control. The fleet above adjusted positions. Ships moved in careful patterns, testing the child's reach, trying to measure the limits of his power. Their sensors recorded fluctuations that could not be explained. Every time the child whispered, energy shifted in subtle ways. The observers began to realize that the child was not just unique. He was something the galaxy had never seen before. Aron held the child close. "You must rest now," he whispered. The child, exhausted, nodded, whispering softly as he closed his eyes. Aron watched him, heart heavy. He knew the fleet would not leave. He knew they would try to study, to control, to use the child. And he knew that hiding was only a temporary solution. Days passed with tension mounting. The child's whispers became more powerful, more instinctive. Lights flickered, machines responded, energy shifted in unpredictable ways. The observers adjusted, learning, preparing. They could not predict him, could not control him. They only watched, recording every reaction, sending data to distant command. The colony became quiet. Settlers moved carefully, avoiding areas where anomalies occurred. Children stayed close. Adults whispered, and engineers worked in small teams, wary of strange fluctuations. Aron trained the child daily, teaching him to breathe slowly, to whisper softly, to focus on calmness and trust. The child obeyed, small hands folded, eyes wide and alert, whispering softly as he moved through the hidden chambers. One night, the child discovered an old power unit in the tunnels. It had been broken for years. He knelt beside it, whispering softly. The unit hummed faintly, lights flickering back on. Sparks flew, then stopped. Energy flowed steadily. Aron watched silently, knowing that the child was bending power itself, not just machines. He whispered quietly, telling the child to remain calm. The child nodded, small hands resting on the unit, eyes wide with quiet wonder. Outside, the fleet adjusted, sensing reactions they could not understand. The child's power was growing, bending energy in ways no one could predict. The observers on the ground moved closer, disguised, scanning, recording. They could not control him, could not touch him, could not measure the full scope of his influence. All they could do was watch and wait. Aron and the child rested in the hidden chambers. The child whispered softly in his sleep, moving energy without knowing it. Aron held him close, heart heavy, knowing the fleet would not stop. The observers were patient. They would not act recklessly, but they would act eventually. The child had no idea of the danger. He only whispered, and power listened. The colony slept. Machines hummed softly, lights blinked quietly, and energy flowed in subtle ways. Outside, the fleet remained, silent and calculating. The observers were patient, knowing that one day the child would be forced to react. Aron knew the same. He could only protect him for now, keeping him hidden, teaching him to whisper softly, teaching him to trust instinct, teaching him to survive. The little crowned one slept, whispering softly, bending power quietly, changing the world around him without understanding. And above, the watchers recorded everything, sending messages across the void. A human child had awakened a power the galaxy had never seen. The colony had grown tense, the air heavy with anticipation. The fleet above did not leave. Ships glimmered silently in the sky, moving in patterns that spoke of calculation and control. The settlers whispered quietly among themselves, uncertain of what was coming. Machines hummed faintly, lights flickered, and alarms that once meant little now made people pause. The colony had entered a new state of quiet fear. Aaron led the child through narrow tunnels beneath the colony. The little crowned one moved slowly, small hands gripping Aaron's arm. His eyes were wide and alert, observing every shadow, every flicker of light. He whispered softly to himself, as if speaking to the air, and energy responded. Lights blinked gently, wires pulsed, and machines that had been dead for years hummed faintly. Aaron had long ago stopped being surprised. "They are not leaving," Aaron whispered. "They want to test you, to study you, to use you. You must stay calm." God, 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 God. "You must stay hidden," the child nodded, small hands folded in his lap, whispering softly. He did not fully understand danger, but he trusted Aaron completely. Every word Aaron spoke, the child obeyed. The fleet above had changed its formation. Sensors scanned every corner of the colony, searching for anomalies. Drones moved silently along streets, through buildings, and across open spaces. The observers were patient, calculating, persistent. They could not predict the child's power, could not control it, could not measure it. Every whisper from the child changed energy in ways no instrument could capture. One afternoon, the colony experienced a sudden failure in the main energy grid. Machines ground to a halt, lights blinked and died, and alarms rang across the settlement. People panicked, shouting instructions and running to panels that no longer responded. Sparks flew from exposed wires. Fear rose quickly. The child stood quietly, whispering softly. The energy around him shifted. The grid hummed faintly. Circuits stabilized, lights steadied. Machines that had been dead came to life. The engineers froze in confusion. They looked at one another nervously, whispering about coincidences, about luck, about forces beyond their understanding. Aaron pulled the child aside quickly, keeping him hidden from view. That night, the sky above the colony shimmered with movement. The fleet had called reinforcements. Larger ships approached, their hulls reflecting faint light. They moved with purpose, their sensors wide and sensitive. The observers on the ground became more aggressive. They tested energy fields, tried to detect disturbances, and probed machines. Each time the child whispered, the environment responded unpredictably. Lights flickered, circuits pulsed, machines hummed. The observers grew frustrated. Aaron and the child moved deeper underground, into long-forgotten tunnels and storage areas. Aaron had prepared these places for emergencies, but he had never expected this level of threat. "We cannot stay above ground," he whispered. "They are patient, and they will not stop. You must remain calm. Whisper only when you must." The child obeyed, small hands folded, eyes alert, lips moving softly. Outside, the fleet adjusted, moving in calculated patterns. They sensed reactions they could not understand. The child's whispers were bending energy itself, not machines, not electronics, not technology. Energy responded instinctively, in ways no instrument could measure or control. The fleet's command recorded it, sending urgent messages across space. A human child had awakened power beyond comprehension. Days passed. The child's powers grew stronger. Lights flickered, machines responded, and energy shifted in subtle ways. Settlers noticed strange occurrences. Systems repaired themselves. Alarms stopped unexpectedly. Fires cooled without explanation. People whispered about miracles, though they did not understand. Aaron trained the child daily, teaching him to focus, to remain calm, to trust. Instinct. The child obeyed completely. Small hands folded, lips moving softly, eyes wide and alert. Then something new appeared, a distant signal, not from the fleet, not human, something ancient. It touched the colony in waves, subtle but undeniable. The energy reacted to it. Machines hummed strangely. Lights blinked in patterns not seen before. Aaron realized immediately that this was not a human threat. This was something older, something vast, something that had watched civilizations rise and fall across the stars. The child felt it instinctively. He whispered softly, almost instinctively responding, bending power around him. The energy pulsed faintly, responding to his will without his understanding. Aaron held him close, heart pounding. "Stay calm," he whispered. "You cannot fight it. You must survive." The ancient force did not move directly. It did not strike. It only watched, probing, feeling, measuring. Its presence made the air tense, heavy with potential energy. The fleet above sensed it too, reacting with caution, reconfiguring formations, scanning, but they did not understand. Their instruments could measure anomalies, but this was beyond their understanding. This was power that existed on a scale no human or machine could comprehend. The colony felt the tension. People whispered, uncertain of danger. Machines reacted strangely. Lights flickered without pattern. Alarms rang and stopped unexpectedly. Aaron guided the child through hidden chambers, teaching him to breathe, to whisper only when necessary, to trust instinct. The child obeyed, small hands folded, lips moving in soft murmurs, energy responding to his will. One night, a sudden surge of energy struck the colony. Machines failed, lights died, and alarms blared. People panicked. The child, small and fragile, whispered softly, instinctively bending power to stabilize systems. Lights flickered on, circuits pulsed, machines began to function again. Aaron watched, heart pounding. The child had no understanding of what he was doing, yet the force around him listened, obeyed, responded. The fleet above adjusted positions, moving cautiously. They sensed the child's power, growing stronger, unpredictable. The ancient force remained, probing from a distance, waiting. The observers on the ground moved quietly, testing boundaries, scanning for signs of the child. Every time he whispered, energy shifted in subtle ways. Machines responded, lights blinked, and the observers grew frustrated. Aaron held the child close. "You must rest," he whispered. The child, exhausted, nodded, whispering softly as he closed his eyes. Energy continued to respond around him, bending subtly, quietly, instinctively. Aaron knew the fleet and the ancient force would not stop. They were patient, calculating. They would test, probe, and wait for the right moment. Days passed with tension mounting. The child's whispers became stronger, more instinctive. Lights flickered. Machines responded. Energy shifted in ways observers could not measure. The fleet communicated with command, reporting the anomaly as unpredictable, dangerous, unique. The ancient force observed silently, its presence overwhelming, yet hesitant. It did not move to attack. It was cautious, intrigued. Aaron trained the child continuously. "You must stay calm," he whispered. "Your power is growing, but you cannot let them see. You must trust your instincts. Whisper only when necessary." The child obeyed, small hands folded, eyes wide, lips moving in soft murmurs that shaped the environment around him. The colony became quiet. Settlers moved cautiously, avoiding areas where anomalies occurred. Children stayed close to parents. Engineers whispered among themselves, careful and wary. Aaron guided the child daily, teaching him to breathe, to whisper softly, to focus. The child obeyed, unaware of the scale of attention his presence had drawn. One evening, the child discovered an old generator in a hidden chamber. It had been broken for years. He knelt beside it, whispering softly. Lights flickered on, circuits hummed, energy flowed steadily. Aaron watched silently, knowing the child was bending power itself, not just machines. He whispered quietly, telling the child to remain calm. The child nodded, small hands resting on the generator, eyes wide with quiet wonder. Outside, the fleet adjusted, sensing reactions they could not explain. The child's whispers bent energy in ways they could not predict. Observers on the ground moved closer, disguised, scanning, recording. They could not touch him. They could not control him. All they could do was watch and wait. Aaron and the child rested in the hidden chambers. The child whispered softly in dreams, moving energy without understanding. Aaron held him close, heart heavy, knowing the fleet would not stop. The observers were patient. They would not act recklessly, but they would act eventually. The child had no idea of the danger. He only whispered. And power listened. The colony slept. Machines hummed softly, lights blinked quietly, and energy flowed in subtle ways. Outside, the fleet remained, silent and calculating. Observers were patient, knowing that one day the child would be forced to react. Aaron knew the same. He could only protect him for now, keeping him hidden, teaching him to whisper softly, teaching him to trust instinct, teaching him to survive. The little crowned one slept, whispering softly, bending power quietly, changing the world around him without understanding. And above, the watchers recorded everything, sending messages across the void. A human child had awakened a power the galaxy had never seen. The colony had not slept well for many cycles. The fleet above remained in silent orbit, its ships reflecting faint light off the dark sky. The observers had increased their presence on the ground, moving quietly among settlers, scanning, recording, calculating. Every light flicker, every machine hum, every energy fluctuation was observed, measured, and reported. Yet they could not control what they were seeing. Aaron moved carefully through the hidden tunnels with the child. The little crowned one clung to him, small hands gripping his arm. His eyes were wide, observing every shadow, every flicker of light. His lips moved softly in whispers, barely audible, yet the air and energy around him responded. Machines hummed, lights steadied, energy flowed in subtle ways. Aaron had long ago stopped being surprised. He had learned that the child's power was beyond measurement, beyond comprehension.
"They are preparing," Aaron whispered. "They will not wait forever."
"You must stay calm. Whisper only when you must."
The child nodded, whispering softly to himself. He did not fully understand the danger, but he trusted Aaron completely. Every word Aaron spoke, the child obeyed. Above the colony, the fleet adjusted. Ships moved with purpose, their formations precise and calculated. They had observed the child for cycles, measuring reactions to energy fluctuations, to whispers, to instinctive shifts in power. Yet they could not predict him. Every whisper from the child bent energy itself, not machines, not circuits, not technology, but power itself. The observers grew frustrated. Their reports became urgent, their commands more insistent. The colony sensed the tension. People moved carefully. Children stayed close to parents. Engineers whispered among themselves, avoiding areas where anomalies occurred. Aaron guided the child daily, teaching him to breathe slowly, to whisper softly, to focus on calmness and instinct. The child obeyed completely, small hands folded, eyes wide and alert. He whispered softly, and energy responded around him, bending subtly, quietly, instinctively. Then, the first strike came. Not weapons, not explosions, but interference. Machines failed across the colony in coordinated patterns. Lights blinked and died. Circuits overloaded. Alarms rang without reason. The observers tested boundaries, probing the limits of the child's power. Every time the child whispered, energy shifted to stabilize the systems, but the interference was strong, purposeful. Aaron knew this was no accident. They were attempting to force him to act. The child sensed it. He whispered softly, instinctively responding. Energy pulsed faintly, bending to his will without understanding. Lights flickered on, circuits stabilized, machines resumed operation. Workers stared in awe and fear, unable to explain the sudden recovery. Aaron grabbed the child, guiding him through hidden passages, keeping him safe. The fleet above responded to the child's reactions. Sensors detected fluctuations they could not comprehend. Data was sent back to command. The anomaly was growing, unpredictable, and beyond control. The observers on the ground were cautious now. They could not touch him. They could not influence him. All they could do was wait. Days passed in tension. The child's power grew with every whisper. Lights flickered, machines responded, energy shifted in subtle ways. The colony noticed. Systems repaired themselves. Fires stopped before spreading. Broken machines started working again. People whispered about miracles, though they did not understand. Aaron continued to train the child, teaching him to focus, to trust instinct, to whisper softly. The child obeyed, small hands folded, lips moving quietly, energy bending subtly. Then the ancient force returned. Not a ship, not human, but something vast and unseen. Fa, its presence pressed against the colony, probing, measuring, testing. Energy shifted in response, bending subtly around the child's whispers. Aaron held him close. "You cannot fight it," he whispered. "You must survive. You must whisper only when necessary." The child nodded, small hands resting on his lap, whispering softly as if responding instinctively. The observers above and on the ground grew anxious. They could measure reactions, but they could not predict them. The child was bending power itself, not machines, not electronics. Energy responded to his will instinctively. Their instruments failed to capture the full scale of the effect. The fleet reconfigured positions, scanning, probing. Cautious, the ancient force observed silently, testing patience, waiting for the right moment. The colony felt the pressure. Machines acted unpredictably. Lights flickered. Alarms rang and stopped. People moved cautiously, fearful of unknown forces. Aaron guided the child daily, keeping him hidden, teaching him to breathe, to whisper, to trust instinct. The child obeyed, small hands folded, lips moving softly, energy bending subtly to his quiet will. Then the crisis began. A large power surge struck the colony. Systems failed, lights died, machines stopped. Panic spread quickly. The observers tested boundaries, pressing the child indirectly. The little crowned one stood quietly. He whispered softly, instinctively bending energy. Lights returned, circuits stabilized, machines hummed. The colony watched in awe. Aaron held the child close, heart pounding. He had never seen the child act so decisively, yet so calmly. The fleet above adjusted positions. They sensed resistance, They could not attack directly. They could not control the child. They could only observe and adapt. The ancient force waited, probing, measuring, patient. It did not strike directly, but its presence was undeniable. Aaron guided the child to a hidden chamber. "You must rest," he whispered. The child, exhausted, nodded, whispering softly as he closed his eyes. Energy continued to respond around him, bending subtly, quietly. Aaron knew the fleet would not leave. He knew the observers would act eventually. The child had no idea of the danger. He only whispered, and power listened. Hours passed. The child slept, whispering softly in dreams. Machines hummed, lights blinked, energy flowed. Iran watched, heart heavy, knowing that one day the fleet and the ancient force would force a confrontation. The colony remained tense. Settlers moved cautiously, whispering about strange occurrences, miracles, luck. Engineers worked carefully, avoiding areas where anomalies occurred. Then the final test began. The fleet and the ancient force acted simultaneously. Sensors and interference devices activated. Machines failed across the colony in coordinated attacks. Lights blinked and died. Alarms screamed. Panic spread. The child sensed the pressure. He whispered softly, instinctively bending energy. Circuits stabilized, lights returned, machines hummed. The colony watched in awe and fear. Aran held the child tightly.
"Stay calm," he whispered. "Trust yourself."
Whisper, "You can do this." The child obeyed, small hands folded, lips moving in quiet murmurs. Energy bent around him, responding instinctively, defending the colony without conscious thought. The fleet above and the observers on the ground could not predict the reactions. Every device, every sensor, every probe that attempted to interfere was neutralized by the child's whispers. Light stabilized, machines recovered, systems operated beyond normal limits. Even the ancient force reacted cautiously, retreating slightly. Sensing power it had not anticipated, Aaron watched, heart pounding as the child's power expanded. The colony became a quiet beacon of energy, stabilized not by technology, not by engineering, but by the instinctive whispers of a small, crowned human child. Settlers began to sense safety, though they could not explain why. Machines acted perfectly, lights remained steady, energy flowed evenly. The threat above paused, sensing resistance it could not overcome. The child's eyes opened. He looked around, small and fragile, yet aware. He whispered softly once more. Energy responded, bending around him in ways the fleet and ancient force could not measure. The colony remained safe, stabilized, protected. Aaron held him close, whispering encouragement. The child did not need instructions anymore. He had instinctively shaped the world around him with whispers alone. The fleet retreated cautiously. Sensors recorded anomalies, but they could not act directly. The observers on the ground moved quietly back to ships, calculating, frustrated. The ancient force withdrew slightly, testing patience, waiting for the next opportunity. The child remained calm, whispering softly, energy bending gently, instinctively, without thought. The colony slept. Machines hummed steadily. Light shone calmly. Energy flowed. Settlers whispered about luck, miracles, and the quiet that had returned. Aaron watched the child, small and crowned, whispering softly in dreams, bending power instinctively, changing the colony, the fleet, and even the distant observers without understanding. The little crowned one had survived. He had protected the colony. He had bent power itself with whispers alone. And far beyond, in the void, watchers recorded everything. A human child had awakened a power that no one had ever seen. The child stirred, whispering softly again, energy responding around him. Aaron smiled faintly, heart heavy with worry and relief. The colony was safe, for now. The observers had learned caution. The ancient force had taken note, and the little crowned one, small and fragile, continued to whisper, bending power itself, quietly, instinctively, endlessly. The universe had shifted that day. It had noticed the whispers of the little crowned one, and nothing would ever be the same.